Have you ever told the truth, the careful, documented, necessary truth, and watched it disappear like it never existed? Welcome back to Auntea-Ology, the Antidote Dialogues. I'm Sobia Ali-Faisal.
And I'm Mueni Mutinda.
Last time, we talked about allies who go silent. This time, we're talking about what happens when power doesn't like what it hears. Not, oops, we missed that, but active, strategic silencing. The report you wrote that got buried, the email that went unanswered, the job you lost because you told the truth about Palestine, or about racism, or about harm that someone didn't want named. No pitchforks, no pretending either. Just a real conversation about who gets to speak, who pays the price, and what we do when the system you trusted brushes you under the rug. Mueni, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing very well, thank you. Sun is shining and I'm ready for this conversation today. How are you?
I'm doing well too. Yeah. I'm definitely ready for this conversation because this is something that I think a lot of us who work in this space can relate to. So yeah, I'm very excited about this conversation today. Okay, so tea's ready. Let's talk about what active silencing looks like when no one thinks they're the bad guy. The feedback that went nowhere, the job lost for telling the truth, the report that got buried, and how power says, we value your voice while locking the door. Mueni, I know you have a story to share about this.
Yes, I do. This one still has a tinge of pain to it, even as I open up about it. So it was early on in my development career, and I was not a strong professional writer that effectively communicates who you are, why you're writing, what you want, and when. This is all learned skills, and I just did not have that at that time. I'm more of a creative writer. I want to tell stories, and my stories meander. They're the kind of stories that have run-on sentences and connect multiple thoughts together. Maybe because that's the way my brain works. So I had to train to become a better, more effective writer and communicator. And early on, you can probably imagine how basic I was about it. And that's okay. That was my beginning. But for others who had been in the sector longer than me, seasoned professionals in their 30s and 40s at that time, many were not kind, unfortunately. There was an unspoken expectation that one should just know and be able to write compelling emails, succinct reports, winning proposals, briefs, and so on. But how do you get there if the attitude is one of judgment from colleagues? I was privileged to have the opportunity to travel for work. So at one point, I went on a field trip, project visit. The expectation is and has always been that you go to learn, attend meetings, listen and try to address issues, and then document all of this, along with what needs to be done next, by whom and when. Kind of the standard reporting about where you were, with whom, what happened, what you learned, and why it matters. 2 weeks after this particular field trip, I drafted a report that I felt was a masterpiece. That was probably a stretch, but the point is, I was proud. I was able to document what I learned and what I felt was important. Problem is, I was the only one who felt that way about my report. I came to find out in a kind of roundabout way from my director at the time and other directors that my report was the butt of their jokes. One of them even made a remark about the report in my hearing. They didn't even try to mask their true thoughts and reactions to my report. It was a kind of informal public outing and shaming that never received the critique with care that it needed. I needed to begin strengthening my skills. I wondered why my boss did not bother to give me feedback directly and instead, in my hearing, made it known I was the subject of discussion in their leadership meetings. The fact that years and years later, I can still remember that moment and those comments tells us all we need to know about silencing behavior. At the moment, it might seem innocuous. Oh, just a joke or just some feedback. Or in my case, no feedback at all. No real feedback. But it has the power to create deep wounds and scars. For a long time, I didn't believe I could write, which meant a lack of belief in the value of my own beautiful and powerful voice, whether in written and or spoken form. It felt like, along with the report, they buried me a little bit too. Not with a memo, not with a firing, just with laughter, with dismissal, with making sure I knew in front of others that what I had to offer wasn't valuable. That's the quietest kind of silencing. The kind that makes you do it to yourself afterwards because you internalize it. Maybe I'm not a good writer. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I should just stay quiet. And it has taken a long, long time to find and claim and learn to celebrate my voice. I'm here today, living and speaking my truth, and that is a miracle.
So Mueni, thank you for sharing that. Man, when you were speaking, I just like I could feel it in my gut that the laughter like is just the feeling that I had was just that thinking kind of feeling.
It was awful.
Yeah, yeah, I can only imagine. And especially when you're first starting out, like that's when you need the most encouragement, that's when you need the most support and mentorship. And that's just really, really, really poor leadership on their part, right? That's not leadership at all. Because part of leadership is that mentorship, providing advice and guidance to the next generation of folks who are doing the work that you're doing. So what I'm hearing from this story is that silencing isn't always dramatic, right? It's not always someone telling you directly like to be quiet or shut up. Sometimes it's a laugh. Sometimes it's a report that never gets read. Sometimes it's being fired without warning, like what happened to me, and watching everything you built get erased because of that. And what the problem is that a lot of times the people who are doing the silent thing don't even think they're the bad guy. They think they're just like maintaining standards. They're protecting the team. They're just being honest. I mean, I don't know what would prompt people to laugh at someone's work, but people don't even realize that what they're doing is so harmful.
Yeah, I see it as a loss of their humanity. I mean, there's this sort of need and interest to uphold the pillars of the system, professionalism, whatever, all the white supremacist characteristics you want to put in there, at the expense of being a human being and dealing with other people, particularly junior professionals, junior staff, with care, with kindness. So that was not there from the get-go. And as you say, it is insidious because up to this moment, even telling you that story, I was transported to that moment. I can see in my mind's eye standing in that room and just off within earshot, the directors having this conversation and one of them laughing. I can hear that. My whole body is transported there even now as we're having this conversation. So what is perceived as harmless can be so defining in someone else's life. And I think this is why we have to be careful with the language, with the way we communicate with each other. Even though something may be said in jest, it can do such damage, and we may never even realize that it was because somebody heard something or they received something in a way, or a leader didn't bother to take the time and have the conversation that they needed to have with me and say, hey, there are serious gaps within this report, and how about we work on it together so that I can make it clear what the expectations are for these kinds of documents and things like that. What I needed was guidance. What I got was humiliation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can't help but think that the laughter was actively a silencing technique in some ways. Like, I mean, what else would they have expected from laughing other than for the person to feel like, well, I can't share what I learn. I can't communicate in this way with them because I'm going to be met with laughter. And Yeah, like it just feels like it would be something that they are engaging with some level of knowledge somewhere that what they're doing is silencing you.
They know what they're doing. I mean, we know. We know deep down the motivations that drive us to show up in certain ways or not show up, not speak up, whether it's to be an ally or not, or whether it's to do the thing we know deep down is the right thing to do. Whether we follow through with that is one thing, but we do know. I fully believe that we do know. And, I didn't know until much later. I didn't learn to ask the questions that I love to ask, which are deep questions that are meant to get at the motivations behind why we do the things that we do and how we show up the way that we show up. Because to be quite frank, this experience is about a lack of transparency within an organization. It's a lack of the ability for my director at that time to take responsibility and have an honest, courageous conversation that we needed to have. But because they were the leader, they couldn't do that. And me as a newly hired, newly in the sector, I had so much to learn, still have a lot to learn. But the question that I'm holding is, what does it say about an organization where there's no infrastructure for skill building, only judgment?
And so many organizations are like that. I mean, I'm sure you can relate, and I'm sure people who are listening can relate to this, but there are so many organizations that don't have that infrastructure for skill building, for mentorship, for training properly, for providing onboarding. I was at a large institution, even like at a place like UPEI, and there was no like structured onboarding, right? And a lot of times the issues that we have in our workplaces have to do with that lack of proper training, that lack of role clarity, that lack of mentorship and guidance. And it's such a common problem in so many organizations that there is no infrastructure for that. And what ends up happening is then there's just that judgment. You're expected to know. You're expected to be able to write well from the get-go. You're expected to be able to communicate in a professional way. And when those expectations are not met, there's just judgment. And that judgment leads to shame. And that shame leads to shutting down and self-silencing and self-policing and self-censoring. And that doesn't make for a space where people can learn and grow.
No, they can't. And it's so amazing the way that you've captured that, because it's true. I think on the human side, that's what's happening, that silencing that turns into shame and then self-silencing. I'm also wondering about the institutional side, because you have leaders in institutions who reinforce expectations of what appropriate engagement, appropriate workflow, work programming, work deliverables are supposed to be done, and how knowingly or unknowingly they're reinforcing systemic expectations that nobody can meet. So to what extent have they been failed by the system that they're upholding, where they haven't been probably onboarded and trained and supported as junior staff in their day? And then they've just perpetuated these expectations that are not questioned. They're just kind of, it's like, you wake up in the morning and, say it's like in the wintertime and it's half dark, you don't turn on the light and you just put on the first thing that you see. Well, you don't even stop to look at, does this even match? Is it a good outfit? Does it make sense? So if we're not doing that questioning and interrogating of the systems that we're part of reinforcing, we're part of the problem. And the other thing I want to say is I just want to thank those people, because I probably would not be doing the work that I do if it wasn't for them. So in a sense, going through this experience and learning to transmute it to, here's an incident that happened and here's what I'm going to glean from it and learn from it. And I can tell you, when I have participated in onboarding work programs and expectations, I have been thorough because of that learning, and just learning to be clear about, these are the expectations. This is the culture of this workspace, and you can contribute to make this a better place. So I don't know what your experience has been, but I don't know that in the past and maybe now that space is given to junior staff to kind of co-create the space that they want to work. I think organizations talk that they are doing that in practice. I wonder.
I think some organizations do, but many don't. I mean, I've been guilty of this myself, where I've wanted staff to create their own roles and to find their own roles for themselves. I wanted them to have that kind of agency, but then I didn't offer them enough structure. So it just became very hands off, and I think a little bit too hands off for their comfort, really. For a lot of folks, that's very anxiety producing, and understandably so. So there needs to be a balance. And I think your idea of co-creating is what makes sense. I don't think I was co-creating in that space. I was just letting them create. But co-creation means that leadership then provides some structure. There have to be some parameters provided and there has to be some guidance. But at the same time, there has to be some level of agency, I think, among staff to be able to create their own position. And I think that creates more investment, in people's work. They feel more invested in that work. But then it also comes down to leaders being trained properly. I don't think I've ever really gotten any leadership training. So I think it can be difficult to also train on leadership just because there's, not everyone is going to be the same kind of leader and not everyone should be the same kind of leader. There needs to be a lot of diversity in leadership types. But nonetheless, I think there still isn't enough training for people who get into leadership positions. They just kind of end up in them through the course of going through their career. Personally, I was just emulating my boss in the space that I was a leader. And she was also, we're trying to figure everything out. Things were new. A lot of positions were brand new and we're all kind of just trying to figure it out. And she was able to give me some guidance. But honestly, some of being a good leader just comes from experiencing leadership and being a leader. Now that I'm no longer in that position, I can look back and see all the mistakes I made and what I would have done differently if I were to do it again. And it feels very clear to me now. And it's also just what I've learned and the confidence I've gained. In the moment, you don't know what to do, but after, you've gone through it and you understand all your different options and what options you don't have, it becomes easier to navigate similar situations in the future. I mean, that's just what learning is, right? And so now that I've gone through a lot of the stuff that I did when I was in that leadership position, I feel more confident being able to navigate difficult situations, complicated situations with a lot more knowledge and strength. But for a lot of folks, training in the most basic things sometimes is necessary. And I think your example is a really good example of how even the most basic stuff, like don't laugh at people because it's just not kind. And for some folks, they even need training in that.
Mm-hmm. It's basic human decency, I would say. I mean, there are roles and responsibilities. We come together to work together and we create agreements within that system for how we will work together for the benefit of everyone. And within that, what does critique with care actually look like in practice is a good question, because there will be conflict, there will be disagreement, there will be differences of opinions and perspectives and all kinds of things. But when that comes up, how are we then to deal with that? And I think your point about questioning the training of leaders is a good one, because oftentimes I think we are just thrust into situations, into opportunities, into roles, and then we learn by doing. We are building the plane as we fly it. And there are casualties, if I can call it like that, along the way, including ourselves. And then later on, we look back and say, oh, I could have done that differently. I should have done this and that. Oh, I learned so much through that experience. I think there's also the perspective that we take about learning and curiosity. You and I talk about curiosity a lot, staying curious, being open, bringing your heart and mind in a state of openness to learn and engage, and not being so tied to the way things are, such that there isn't flexibility to learn and exchange. So There's a lot there about how to show up in ways that are not reinforcing, because we always have agency. We do, even as junior staff. There was agency I had there. I just was not aware of it. I just didn't know what to say or how to go about it. And the fact that I needed mentorship is another thing. For leaders as well, they also sounds like they needed mentorship and support for how to manage, how to invite staff into courageous conversations, difficult conversations that need to be had for the health and well-being of everyone within the organization.
And I mean, the risk, of course, of not doing any of that or not doing that is that people get silenced, right? I mean, even the fact that you didn't know to ask, that you can ask for mentorship, or you didn't know about your agency, that is silencing, right? And there's so many ways in which we get silenced, and lack of clarity, lack of training, lack of support, lack of resources, not knowing what you can say and can't say, when you can say it, what you can do, what you can't do. It's just, all of this works to silence us. And when we're silenced, there's so much work that doesn't get done. It's like being in an organization and you want to create change and you want to do good. But if you feel like, if you bring something up, you'll be silenced, or you'll be made fun of, or you'll be made to feel stupid, or, reprimanded in some way, you're not going to bring it up. And then the organization risks not doing something that could actually be impactful for the people they're working with. And that's a real loss.
And then it becomes about creating alternative spaces to create conditions for that work to happen elsewhere, so that then people can build the resilience, the stamina to be able to bring that to workspaces and so on. And the way that we start those conversations, those invitations for people to reconnect with their agency and activate their courage, their curiosity, their hearts and minds, I think that is so beautiful, because it's something I can speak for from myself, from my own experience, looking at where I'm standing, finding my own voice, and going through that process of finding my own voice, and learning to come into full embrace of that, like acceptance of my voice and celebrating my voice and using my voice in a way that is communicating things, truths that I've experienced, that I've learned and continue to learn as I work with you, Sobia, and with so many others. There is opportunity to emerge, to have this rebirth. We talk about planting seeds, and that growth and germination is the potential. We're invested in the potential of what each of our lives can bring and have within themselves to bring, if the conditions are right for that.
Exactly. And that reclaiming your voice, that's the antidote, right? That is the antidote that we're offering. It is exactly what you have described and what you have said. So we have some messy questions that we want you to sit with this week. What's the truth you've been sitting on that could cost you and that you are willing to pay a price for? Who went silent when you needed them most, and who showed up? What would it take for you to speak anyway? Not because it's safe, but because silence is heavier. And finally, if you've ever been the one who buried someone else's truth, even unintentionally, what would it take for you to go back and dig it up?
So we started by asking about the report that got buried. And here's what I'm sitting with. They can bury your report. They can laugh at your writing. They can fire you and block you on Facebook. But they cannot bury your voice unless you agree to stay quiet. The work is not making them listen. The work is refusing to stop speaking to yourself, to your people, to the ones who will hold your truth like the sacred thing it is.
Next time, we're going to talk about being the lone voice, being the only one in the room who looks like you or who is saying the things that you're saying, and how difficult and draining that can be. If this episode stirred something, if you've had a report buried, a truth dismissed, a voice laughed at, we've built spaces for that. Our Auntea-Ology monthly gatherings, the online course, and coaching and consulting for those ready to speak. Links are in the show notes. We also have many resources for you on things like building self-awareness, radical honesty, allyship, and more. Go to seedroom.ca to get your hands on those.
And if you want to talk about what landed, reach out. info@seedroom.ca. Free discovery calls. No pitch, just a conversation. Thanks for pulling up a chair. Come tired of being buried. Leave knowing your voice still matters.
Stay messy, stay curious, and stay loving.